Okay, welcome everybody to number 125 of the Circle of Wine Writers Let's Talk series. Today's topic is let's talk about Through the Looking Glass, Perceptual Individualism and Rethinking Wine and Food with Tim Hanni, Master of Wine. I'd like to extend a welcome to the members that haven't been to one of these events before, and also to the non-members. The Circle was founded in 1960 in the UK. And today has about 270 or more members, including wine writers, educators, broadcasters, and other professional communicators. Membership's now broken down 50-50 between the UK and overseas. There's more information about the Circle on the website, so please do visit if you'd like to find out more, and there's also details to join online. I'd now like to hand over to Wink Lorch, who's very kindly agreed to introduce Tim for us today at rather short notice. Thank you, Wink.
Well, it's a complete honour because I have known Tim since before he was a Master of Wine, which is a long time ago because he and I actually studied it together. I'm a proud failure in case you don't know. So I met Tim in London because Tim has been a Master of Wine for about 35 years. And in those days, the only option for a non-Brit was to come to London to actually take the exams. And so there was a handful of foreigners who would come and join us Brits and would go to tastings and try and desperately catch up with the whole world, which Tim managed to do and became one of the very, very first. Were you the first American Master of Wine? Or
Joel Butler and I both passed in 1990. We were the first, yes.
So 1990. So as well as being a Master of Wine, Tim is a professionally trained chef. He's a fanatic about gastronomy, despite saying that wine and food pairing is a complete fantasy. He has specialized in consumer research, and he's been a consultant in wine to the wine business and also in sensory sciences. He's very well known for critically rethinking conventional wisdom. I think we'll all find that out soon. He's been studying wine and gastronomy now for nearly 60 years, since he was 3 years old, and spent over 35 years researching sensory perception and its implications for wine education, marketing, and hospitality. The Wall Street Journal has said that he is the wine anti-snob. But he's an author of a real book, which I meant to reach from my bookcase but forgot, which is called Why You Like the Wines You Like. And he's a leading advocate for making wine culture more inclusive and consumer-centered. Well done, Tim. The floor is yours. Over to you. I look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you all so much, and thanks for the honor of being here and reconnecting with many of you. A couple quick items. Let's see. Are we successfully sharing my screen? Awesome. Okay, great. So I'm going to be going through an awful lot of material very quickly, okay? In this modern world, I would like to share that I also use AI, artificial intelligence, and I know what a hot topic that is alone, let alone when I get started with what I'm going to present. But all of this material is my curiosity, my education, and professional collaborations, my work that I've been doing for quite a long time. I use AI to organize, refine, and clarify my work. I am when I started to do work in neurology and whatever, I actually found out I have learning disabilities. I am dyslexic, which I knew for a long, long time. And I also have ADHD, I'm borderline autistic, And that explains an awful lot about my dysfunctional life. Okay. Anybody, as I go through this, if there's anything that really piques your interest, we'll only have 20 minutes for Q&A. Contact me directly. Here's my direct phone number, cell phone in the US. If you'd like any background, if you'd like to see some of the research, if you want to argue or contest anything I'm saying, let me know. That's how I learn. And especially if you're interested in participating in any of the research or educational programs, because this is quite a project. In about 1999, I started to look at perception. I'd spent a lot of time, and the wine industry spends a lot of time with sensory sciences. And part of my curiosity and things that I was seeing was more and more in perceptive sciences. So I'm going to start with a very controversial statement about perception and reality. Perception is not reality. We can argue the semantics and personal realities or whatever, but perception is really how an individual interacts with what we call reality. So we don't actually uh, uh, experience reality, we interpret reality. Okay. Um, at the end of this, and during this, or already, you might choose that these are new opportunities to understand, promote, expand the enjoyment of wine, or you might think that I'm a nutcase and this is the sad end of my life and I've lost my grip on reality, okay, as we know it. A quick timeline, I started doing all this, reading Larousse Gastronomique when I was 14 years old. That's my dad's Chaîne de Rôtisseurs from the 1960 next to my MW thing. Uh, I wasn't doing well in school, so I started to study gastronomy and cooking, and wine was my principal interest. In 1972, I left college to begin my culinary career with a focus on classical French cuisine. I did that until 1979, where I actually got to continue my culinary and my wine uh, uh, end of things. I was hired into the wine trade as a retail wine manager in Atlanta, Georgia. Oops, there I go again. And passed the Master of Wine examination in 1990. A real quick word about that. In 1989, I was one of the most epic failures in the history of the Institute. And I signed up for a writing course because my problems organizing thoughts and so forth. And I went to the wrong writing seminar for 3 days. I had registered for the correct seminar, but showed up at the wrong one. And when I went to the registration, it was critical thinking and disruptive innovation for electrical engineers. And I'm like, what the hell is this? And I stayed and it changed my life. Okay. Can everybody see the entire screen? Because I've got, okay, good. It had me start rethinking a lot of things in my life. And in 1993, this is important also, I married the woman of my dreams in 1993 and also sought professional help for alcoholism. When I started drinking wine in 1966, when I was 14, somebody should have gotten a notice that's not normal. And so I'm a recovering alcoholic for 32 years. And the reason that's important is I had some hard decisions to make. And one of them was I'm going to stay in the industry. I am not going to try to be the end all. I'm not going to tell you what you should like. I'm not going to tell you how I describe the wine. I'm not going to tell you what wine and food to have. I'm going to listen rather than lecture. Instead of a prescriptive way of doing wine and food, I kind of turned the table. So it's very important. And I'm still married to the woman of my dreams. All right. The origin of this work, I began more and more to witness and be present to how we push consumers away. And that goes to my mother-in-law, Joanne. Joanne is a millionaire. She's a PhD in economics. Uh, she travels the world. She's had a period as a semi-professional golf player, and the wine industry doesn't like her. And she's, according to the cliches and the stereotypes of the wine industry, she doesn't fit our mold in because she likes sweet wine. Okay. Uh, I also was very aware of this in around 1990, but I also just what we say about the history and the traditions and in the era of wine and food does not match up to my very, very in-depth knowledge of gastronomy, particularly French gastronomy. Okay. Uh, I was also becoming more and more aware of the challenges in wine education and communications and the sort of escalation of disagreements and lack of clarity around how we describe and define things. And then all of a sudden, I found an understanding of something called perceptual individualism. And we will talk about that in depth and how understanding perceptual individualism has us be able to be much more aware of why our perceptions are different and how everybody's unique in their perception. And now the work is heading towards a new book that I've got in the work, and then adaptive strategies, so that when we're talking to others, we can clarify what our perception is and how we're perceiving things, but we can also more intently listen and understand why there's disagreements and arguments, why Joanne actually loves the wine she loves, and not try to convert her necessarily or put these stereotypes on her, but actually to communicate and have and understand she's a wine consumer and she should be respected, and we should adapt to her perception of how things should be, and everybody else in the world. This work goes way, way beyond wine and food. It's kind of incredible the depth and where this all goes. When I was asked to do this presentation, I usually research who am I talking to, and as I've mentioned, I go way, way back with the organization, and I agree we should improve the standards that we have of communications about wine and spirits. We should contribute to the growing knowledge and interest in wine, even though it's starting to wane, unfortunately, now. And this is the one that I went, yippee! Inclusion is the way we treat people and perceive all differences. We're taught this is actually what we're talking about today, how to achieve that. So how did I become my awareness was why is there this disparity even between experts, the same wine, same glass, same moment. And I've watched as two masters of wine sitting opposite each other at dinner pick up the same wine and go, wow. And one of them says, that's disgusting. And the other one saying, that's fantastic. Literally two masters of wine, the same bottle, the same glassware, And one of them thought the wine was commercially unacceptable. The other thought it was the greatest example they had ever had of its type. And then they start to go, oh, what are we they couldn't believe they were tasting the same wine. So there we go. I do consumer research and have been conducting this now for over 25 years. I've got tens of thousands of responses from consumers that were gathered in a very unique way, in a very, very well orchestrated way. And there is a huge number of people who love wine, but are actually embarrassed to even say they like wine because of the shame they feel because of our ignorance and how we've created these stereotypes and so forth. Doing consumer research is hard when the consumers won't even tell you truthfully what wines they like or don't like, or can't even describe them on the simplest terms because of our communication barriers and our different ways of describing as an expert in communicating with consumers. We also find very frequently the more education many people receive, and this is particularly apparent in the hospitality and services industry, where sometimes there's forced wine education. But we find and have data that shows wine education actually makes many people less confident. It does not make them more confident. They become more confused, they become less confident. This is a biggie for me, and this goes all the way back to my early days with Pamela Van Dyke Price sitting there, and I'm trying to introduce White Zinfandel to London. Why is sweet a four-letter word in the industry? When did that happen and why? Why does the same wine taste different to people? And they'll argue about it. And this is a particular one. Why are so many critical words so poorly defined and misunderstood? Okay, so that was my cognitive dissonance. This is a tiny bit of my personal research documentation of cross-modality and adaptivity of taste and smell, breathing as a determinant for taste and olfactory integration. Things like you've got a fast act, if you hold your right nostril shut and breathe, and then you'll notice, and then do the opposite with your left nostril, you'll see one nostril has more velocity and volume than the other. And there's actually a reason for that, for molecular weight of odor molecules and whatever. Those of you that I've known for 35 years know that I'm the Swami of umami. I introduced that concept into the Western wine and food general population and met so much resistance that it was unimaginable. So I've been causing trouble for quite a long time, all right? Wine experts' recognition of wine odors is not verbally mediated, et cetera, et cetera. So then one of the big things for me is when I started to look at genetics and perception and preferences and so on. One of the most well-known is a genetic variant called OR6A2. And if you have this genetic group, when you smell coriander or cilantro, it's important to be able to distinguish what people use which word. One group of people, it's absolutely disgusting. They will never like it. It's like a bar of soap on their food. And it's not a matter of experience. It's not a matter of anything other than their genetics. Julia Child had this variant. And if there was a speck of cilantro or coriander in her food, she would return it, say, you ought to clarify that on your menu. It's disgusting. Get it away from me. There are thousands of these variations, thousands, okay? I started doing work on how could we better understand the preferences, the attitudes, the behaviors, and expectations of consumers. And so I published this report with Dr. Virginia Udermolen in 2010. And then in 2009, at the behest of somebody who found themselves in the book, former senior vice president of communications at Mondavi, he helped me get Sasha Paulson to organize my thoughts and write this book. It's published in 2012. So this work was done in 2010. The book was published in 2012, still available on Amazon, and still the basis of my work. What we found is some people have 500 taste buds, other people have more than 12,000. 500, 12,000. That makes a difference in what you perceive. We found also that there are words that we use day in and day out. People in our industry, people who educate, people who write about wine need to know how to distinguish the difference between taste, smell, and flavor, and we don't. And it's not hard. It's easily demonstrable, but we've somehow dumped those modalities, sensory modalities, into one bucket. The word terroir, if you rigorously, and I can provide this documentation, it'll be in my new book, it just means an agricultural area. We've added so much to the meaning, and that's fine. That's, you know, that's the evolution of words and semantics and whatever. But there's an easy way when somebody asks, what is terroir? Say, oh, it means the area that an agricultural product like wine comes from. That's all. And then you can talk about the soil and all the other things. And then there's this. We've got to save people from themselves. We've got to move them up to better wines, step away from the sweet wine. So I started what's called the Perception Project, establishing a valid foundation for understanding principles of perception and uniqueness of how we perceive the world. Research has been going on for 35 years with a collection of the most wonderful, wonderful people from around the world, virtually none of them associated with wine. Wine research is flawed and biased in almost every case by attitudes and opinions and judgments before the research even starts. So I stopped 35 years ago, I stopped working with wine researchers. The research I do is an aggregate. I worked with the most wonderful range of everybody in linguistics, psychosensory and behavioral and psychobiological and anthropology. And then this will continue until I croak because I love it. It's just so fascinating and fun. All right, here's the big flip. This is the crux of it. Sensations are only the raw data of perception. And because we're genetically different, because we're biologically unique, sensations aren't the same from one to the next. And this goes for what we hear, what we see. I've got to wear something to adjust because my eyesight's, some of you have the same variation I have, and we could share our glasses, but we know that we need them. Perception is the entire processing. It's the sensations, the organization, the interpretation, it's the neurotransmitters and everything that creates the experience. And that in turn then creates our emotions, our valuations, our beliefs, our expectations and opinions, okay? So one of the big things I'm recommending is shifting sensory science is fantastic and valuable and so forth, but we really need to look at wine from a perceptual science versus that. So this is rethinking wine, uh, focus on the consumers, understanding perceptual individuality, um, learning more about psychophysics and perceptual sciences, installing perceptual education, and when we get to it, looking at flavor modulation versus wine and food pairing and educational reform. The Wine Spirits Education Trust has unfortunately, and this is a notice to them, they're taking more and more of my work back when I was actually doing it under permission with Anthony Moss. And so my work is showing up in WSET. I'm just a little byline at the back of it. And it's really hard for this reform because we're trying to take old concepts, introduce new concepts, and the overlap makes things really, really difficult. All right, consumer-centric focus is introducing perceptual science, and it doesn't have to be at an extreme level. It's just simple concepts. And then fostering an understanding of these differences. Oh, I have empathy with you. I'm curious about why we are different. Oh, come, you're a wine drinker. Come on, here, let me know more about you so I can better make personal recommendations about what you will like. Let me become a better writer. So when I cover Tuscany, I give equal focus on some of the great sweet wines, the wonderful grape Moscato, as I am to the super Tuscans and the really expensive stuff. That's how we are going to have to change to survive with new generations and what's going on. Psychophysical principles are this whole perceptual system, and exploring how detection and thresholds and sensitivities drive our individual process or preferences, and then how perception can be similar or different. Perceptual individualism, every one of us lives in a unique sensory world shaped by genetics, neural pathway conditioning, learning, and experience. So we've got genetics, we've got neural pathways that can be, it's our reward and punishment system. It's how we acquire new tastes, so to speak. Learning is neural plasticity, how our brain reforms information, and our experiences, which are our psychology. So that's our system. There is no correct way to describe a wine. The point system versus eloquent descriptions versus 20-point system versus, there's no best or correct way. Different people respond differently to different systems. And we just need to quit the argument and pay more attention to the consumers and understand our own differences. Perception, I love this. About 40% of people see, when they see this illusion, the woman spinning clockwise, 30% see her spinning anti-clockwise, and about 50% see her changing the direction she's spinning, right? This is this is neuroplasticity. You can't trust your perception. We got to stop acting like you can. We are different. What's happening, your brain, depending on which hemisphere is processing or sees or go one way or another. And for some people, their brain goes, I can't figure it out, and they change. It's them changing, not her. So the education reform, we need to deconstruct a lot of this dogma, critically rethink. Thank you for the engineering seminar I went to. We need to look at these myths and the pseudoscience and cultural biases that have gotten us to this confusing, elitist, often mess of misinformation and poor communications. Two people looking at the same thing, having different perspectives. No one's right or different wrong. But what happens if you're with the group that sees this as a 9 and you see it as a 6, you just, what's wrong with me? I think I'll go have a beer, or I think I'll have a seltzer or a cocktail. So many people don't see wine the way experts see it, and even enthusiasts, so they just go to other beverages, and we've got data to prove that. You hear people talk about, oh, this racing acidity, and I really look for the acidity in the wine. Well, there's a study that shows that 11 to 12% of people can actually eat lemons and enjoy it. There's about 18 to 26% that like it but aren't doing it, and that 70% hate it. So when somebody's given their personal opinion that wines have to be acidic and have this characteristic, who are you talking to? Do you know that actually you're in a minority of people who like what you like? Doesn't mean not to share those opinions, but wouldn't it be great to share, I love this characteristic. If you don't, here's another example of the Riesling grape or Sauvignon Blanc or what Pinot Noir or whatever. What we don't know, and this is the reform, Montrachet prior to the 1960s in great vintages was often as sweet as a Sauterne. It was as likely that you would serve Chateau Yquem with oysters or a fish course, and that all these dessert wines were actually not served with dessert. They were aperitifs. They were served with the meal. This is from 1936. This is in the 1961 Crown edition of Le Rousse Gastronomique, and it was added in 1961. So in 1961, this was the serving of wines. This was not wine and food pairing, because we made wine and food pairing up. It's a figment of our imaginations, and it was not classic. It wasn't traditional. And love to discuss that with anybody who wants to also look at more data and whatever. So we need to create a framework for wine events. So welcome to your first tasting of wine. First, you're going to learn about yourself. We're going to do some demos, and you're going to learn what your sensitivities and your preferences are. And then we're going to learn about others. We're going to look at wine with food from a standpoint of interactions, not pairing. Understanding the interactions, and that flavors go up and down and whatever, but it's totally dependent on who you are and what your sensitivities are. This magical thing because of these herbs and whatever doesn't mean a thing if you hate those herbs, like the cilantro. We also need to look at the misconception, the pseudosciences, in metaphor matching. Oh, it's a big wine, you have big food. It's red wine, you have red meat. There's literally no truth to the idea that red wine mitigates the bitterness and astringency in the wine. It's the salt you put on it. But we're not taught about what the science is behind salt, which is really pretty fascinating and easy to demonstrate. Everybody, every one of you, cook a nice, well-marbled piece of steak, serve a tannic wine with it, with no salt on it, no seasoning of any kind. Sip your wine, taste the meat and some of the fat, taste the wine. It gets more bitter and more astringent. They served red wine with red meat because the astringency acted as a mouthwash for meat and game that was aged to the point that we would find putrid today. Okay, so what we've done is we've created this elaborate mess of how we go about wine and food matching, and we're actually matching metaphors. Come to my house. I'm in Prescott, Arizona. Anytime, and I'm sincere about this, and Wink knows this. Come to my house. I will take you through this. Get me to London. Kate, my wife Kate, wants to go to London again. We can go through all of this step by step, showing you what actually happens with wine and food versus this hypothetical, fantastic, theoretical that's not based on any reality. In Le Rousse Gastronomique, this is from the original text. when you serve the delicious Romanée, the Hermitage, Côte Rôtie, if the guests prefer, serve them white wine, serve them sweet wine. Wine and food pairing, it was you pair the wine to the diner, not the dinner, but we lost that sense of hospitality that there were sweet wines anywhere, of course, with the roast and whatever. But as they're saying, with the finest, most elegant pastries, this was a sweet course. This actual pairing that they're recommending in Larousse actually sucks. The French, Spanish, Italian, Germans always love and still do. Many of them love sweet wines. We've just taken that out of the education. We forgot about the Kir, that was the French equivalent to white zin. We forgot that sangria is the national drink of Spain, not Tempranillo. We forgot about cordials. The new thing, of course, is the calimocho, the drink of the Basque. And this is what we want to occur. We want people to go in and say, hey, I'm at a steakhouse. I want a steak. And I don't want your crap about why I've got to have a wine I don't like. We want to empower young people. We want to empower current drinkers and actually have them start to dictate and participate in this. It's not that complicated. If you have sweet food and food high in umami, and then have a dry wine, it's like brush your teeth, drink orange juice. It's called flavor modulation. It's scientifically understood, it's predictable, and it's not very complicated. So flavor balancing is just understanding that salt and sourness in the food make a wine milder, reduced in acidity and tannin and bitterness. And that, why is my screen dimming? Hang on just a second. Got to make sure I don't have some sort of a disaster looming, and so forth. Okay. What do I expect about this? Let's increase the interest in wine, and we can do that almost immediately just by welcoming the people who drink sweet wines and saying, wait a minute, we made a mistake. Come on in. Let's have you consume, drink it with the food you want. Let's reduce the confusion and contradictions, create new strategies for new generations. This, in terms of target and marketing and communications and wine writing, is just amazing. Okay, so, oh my gosh, let's improve the standard of communications. That's our joint vision. Let's contribute to the knowledge and growing interest in wine, and let's treat and people differently. That is the crux of what I am trying to do. Okay, all right. Q&A.
Okay, Tim, my head is spinning. I don't know if anybody else is.
It's called the Tim Hanni headache.
Okay. Do you have any remedies? Okay, we have a couple of questions here. There's Brian Armstrong. Brian, would you like to unmute yourself and ask Tim your question? Is Brian still with us? No, okay.
I see him down there.
Brian's question was, does just gastronomy education also often make people less confident? I think that was earlier in your presentation when you were saying, you know, the more wine education you have, it makes people less confident. He's saying, I presume, is that the same for gastronomy education?
Yes and no. We haven't narrowed. All right, so consider the diversity of wines out there in the world, right? I mean, just absolutely mind-boggling. Consider the diversity of people out in the world. Now consider the amount of wine that's focused on by the experts and in journalism and whatever, and all of a sudden it's shrunk to a tiny, tiny fraction. So gastronomy is not typically discussed in such narrow terms. There are things where the disenfranchisement, you know, quit eating the sweet food, that's for kids and whatever. This is all part of the reshaping of our preferences and the neuroplasticity part of it. Don't use so much salt. Um, so in gastronomy, there's an awful lot of areas that we can apply what we're learning about wine to that. The horrible salt shaker. Oh, the food's come. I'm going to salt my food before I even taste it, which makes us recoil in horror. And that's actually number one sign a person has the most taste buds. Salt suppresses bitterness. We don't even know what salt does. We don't like it for its taste. We like it for some interaction it has with ions and taste buds and perception of bitterness. And instead of saying, oh, now if you have health problems, if and whatever, that's a whole separate issue. But we can apply this all to gastronomy as well. And so I'm not sure if that answers the question or not, but
Yes, I think it does go some way, Tim. Yes. Trevor Sherrott had a question about matching.
Right. Can you hear me?
Yes, we
yes,
can.
Trevor, how are you?
Hello. Tim, that was, I don't know where to start, but I would like a copy of your slides because early on you had a long bibliography. Not sure it's a reading list, but I would love to see that. You're very harsh on food and wine matching, and you gave a lot of good reasons. But a lot of us find that some things do work particularly well. Perhaps this is not the right reason, but I've always found the matching on color thing, the red wine and red meat does work. And I've perhaps wrongly believed that the protein in cheese, particularly hard cheese or red meat, does something to insulate the mouth from the tannins. That's just one thing you might comment on. But my main point is this. One of my favorite books is Taste Buds and Molecules by Francois Chartier, who I believe helped develop the El Bulli molecular cuisine. And there's a lot of science in there about why certain foods and certain wines go together because they have common chemicals or whatever it is. Can you comment on those two things?
Yeah, so and one fits to the other. So this all is under an umbrella of pseudoscience, overcomplication, and so on. 1996, I invited 33 sensory scientists to Behringer, stood up, went through my wine and food pairing thing with the permission to call truth or fertilizer to my propositions. So we went through the steak and the red wine and the colloidally suspended phenolics and how proteins are used in wine fining to blah, 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 and that the fat replaces the lost lubrication, which is, how the phenomenon of astringency. And two hands went up and said fertilizer, which stood for BS. And I said, what? I said, that makes sense. They said, and we were at Behringer at the Culinary Center. They said, can you do some steak without the salt? And we did, and it doesn't happen. And they were both, interestingly, PhDs in tribology and oral lubricity, or the mechanics of what's going on with lubrication and astringency in our mouth. And so the thing is, we've got so many false correlations and so forth. And God bless the work of Mr. Chartier. If you have the same molecule and one person finds it horribly, disgustingly bitter, like prop, the whole super taster thing, which I've worked closely with Dr. Linda Bartoshuk. If one person has that genetic variance, and that's what the super taster stuff, most people don't even understand what it is or why it is or the work behind it. Another person doesn't get that molecule at all, and a third person gets it, but they can adapt to it one way or another. So the whole, unfortunately, this whole molecular thing can be so easily disproven. I was just on BBC One Radio 6 months or a year ago or something with the lead scientist at the Manel Chemical Senses Institute. And she was asked about, well, how would you describe the raspberry smell in a Pinot Noir? She said, oh, I'm delighted you picked that. This is one of the lead sensory scientists in the world at the most famous Institute for Chemosensory Research. She says, I don't have that receptor. I can't smell it. So what Chartrier's work, unfortunately, is much ado about nothing. And if you love red wine with your red meat, no one is saying to anyone, stop what you're doing that gives you pleasure. But if we're at a higher level, be responsible for actually understanding what's going on. And that somebody sitting next to you might be in complete disagreement, may be in a completely different perceptual world. So say, I love red wine with red meat, I do that. But if it is a protein, then why doesn't it do it with salmon? Salmon is fatty. Salmon is this. Salmon is higher in glutamate and nucleotides, meaning higher in umami. Try an unsalted piece of salmon with Pinot Noir. This is a metaphorical matching, because Pinot Noir versus Cabernet is not as red, it's not as big, it's not as strong. And that explains the difference between a salmon and a cow, fundamentally, a longer story. But the work I've done in metaphors with Dr. Lakoff, George Lakoff at Berkeley, is just fascinating how humans create heuristics and metaphors. And a metaphor is a bypass of reality that's a useful way of explaining something, but it's very complex. Love to share stuff with you about that, Trevor, and these sciences. And so you're not wrong for what you like, but it might not apply to others. And people, we do know that Moscato drinkers who love Moscato love it with their steak, and actually find Moscato much more delicious within a wide array of foods than any wine expert finds delicious.
Must try it.
Thank you very much, Tim. I've just got Charles online now. He's got a quick question for you. Charles Metcalf.
Charles, how are you, my friend?
What a pleasure. It's been too long.
Oh my God, you've been watching this fiasco from the very beginning, haven't you, sir?
Well, I haven't been thinking about it as rounded a way, I think, as you have. I had all sorts of things. I mean, to start with, I was just going to say, you referred at the very, very near the start about perceptive individualism. Do you just mean that people perceive things differently? Every person has a different receptors and different ideas about what taste is.
Yes, and again, this is each one of these topics that I've hit. I've spent years and years in documenting and researching and so on. So there's typically sort of a bell curve of perception. And let's take vision. Some people are colorblind. Is anybody here colorblind? Okay. And if you are, you just don't have certain receptors from a genetic standpoint. And urging and educating and training and embarrassing doesn't make a difference. Does anybody here have the cilantro gene?
Yes, I do. Absolutely, I hate it. But my wife loves
Charles,
it.
You haven't been educated properly. You let me tell you why you should like it. It's useless, right? I mean, it's disgusting.
Completely. Yeah.
And this starts from childhood. This is why this goes so far beyond wine. We punish cheap people who are neurologically divergent. Me, I was punished all through school. I was the kid no teacher wanted in class. I had questions. My brain works differently. I get caught up on certain things. You may, or anybody else here, have dyslexia or that? Anybody here a saltaholic? Just you love a lot of salt, and yeah, and so you get in Bursac. We've done this in Istanbul. We had a dinner. Wasn't that fun and phenomenal? It,
I still use it at almost every tasting, and it works much better with non-professionals than professionals, because
exactly.
professionals want to say things against it, but when I do it with non-professionals, they are just amazed. I did a tasting for a Brazilian crowd just last Sunday, and I bring the tequila trick and everything. I mean, a piece of grapes, or to do the inverse, the tequila and everything, and it just works. But it works better for hypersensitives than the tolerants. The tolerants don't understand what we are talking about generally.
Exactly. As you learn this, you're going to see traits in your friends, in your partners, in your family, and say, oh God, that's why we argue over the thermostat. That's why this person likes salt so much. That's why this person won't even drink wine. But I know that they drink wine at home, but they won't drink wine when we go out. It answers so many questions about humanity. And to directly answer your question, Charles, every one of us, every human being lives in their unique perceptual world. A lot of times in this bell curve, we'll have agreements. Oh, that's the color red, or this is the smell of this or that. But we can also, a lot of times, think we're talking about the same thing, and we're actually experiencing it totally different, but we both like it. But we don't know that we're getting a completely different, because we're not communicating. No one's writing about, oh, I met with a group of consumers, and the dinner we did at Maria's garden, we had Turkish, wonderful Turkish food from a family of, I wish I could kiss them and go back there again soon. And we served, I think, 6 wines, from sweet to just off dry, a dry white, an oaked white, a light red, and a strong red. And we said, okay, we're going to pour a little bit of each of these wines. First thing, we're going to show you the flavor interactions. The second thing we're going to do, the first thing we're going to do is you decide which wine you like the best. Right. And that's where the experts, none of them will like best the sweet wine. We've learned not to like that. Okay. And then everybody was free. And the people who like the sweet wines were actually acknowledged for having more taste buds, for having other traits of personality and behaviors and in interactions that blows their minds. And then when we actually got to the food, they brought out a dish and refill the wine you want to have with it, play with your wine and food, see what the interactions are for you. And so what it becomes, it's becomes self-discovery, awareness of others, and then play with your wine and food. Who wouldn't want to do that? And the one you drink the most, we'll keep refilling that for you. Thank you very much for being here and being a consumer.
Wow. I think Mandy Stevens is sort of following on a little bit from that, and she's taking on what you're suggesting, but she says, well, how can educators and communicators use all this to make informed suggestions to consumers, or is it up to the consumers to understand the palate themselves?
So who wants to be my guinea pig? Somebody unmute and raise your hand. Okay, Deborah, how are you doing?
You're muted, Deborah.
You raised your hand, but didn't unmute. Let's see, can somebody do that for her?
I'm trying. It's not working.
Hang on, let me see. No.
There I am. There we go.
There you are.
Yeah. Now I've got
Deborah,
a key. I've got
what kind of wine do you love?
I've got the keyboard as well. I can't get rid of it.
So what kind of wines do you love in general?
I grew up, well, I didn't know, my family lived in France and then in Austria. So I was a big Gruner Veltliner fan.
Awesome.
And
That's
last
wonderful.
year I was in Seattle and a sommelier challenged me.
We're going to need, Because of time, we're almost out of time. I'll just
Okay.
be really
Anyway,
short. So
I guessed it was the Grüne Veltliner. So I'm a
Bruno
big fan.
Veltliner, and what are you having tonight for your dinner?
I'm having an Alvarinho.
Having what? I'm sorry.
Alvarinho from Portugal. Charles will know.
I do.
What food?
Oh, what food? Oh,
Yes.
I'm having a chicken risotto with it.
Okay. How about, I'm going to coach you. How about saying I'm having the filet mignon?
Okay, I'm having the filet mignon. And what am I going to drink with it? Hello, Charles.
And would you prefer having a red wine, a white wine, a sweet wine with your filet mignon?
I would rather have a red.
Okay, great. Well, let me then predict that because you like Gruner Veltliner, you like higher acidity, not so much intensity and high alcohol. So I've got a couple of Pinot Noirs. I've got a couple of temperate. I've got some wines. So let's go through those and let's get you a wine you love. And if she said, I don't like red wine, then I would have said, you know what? Your Gruner Veltliner is going to be delicious with your steak. And it would be, but we just don't know it because we go in with metaphors and preconceived ideas.
Well, I don't, because I was going to ask you how, what's the most unusual match you've ever done?
Well, I do every.
Yeah, I do too.
I challenge you all to do your damnedest to try the wrong wine and food combinations.
Yeah, I agree with that. Absolutely.
All right? And people who live on the sensory end of things we call tolerant, they've got less taste buds. They don't get that burn of the high alcohol. They don't have that intensity of the astringency and tannin. And they find oysters and Cabernet Sauvignon quite delicious.
Yeah.
And if you actually go back in time, if you were in Arcachon and you were getting the plate of the Arcachon oysters with the little salty lamb sausages and the mignonette, the salt and the acidity, it'd make your wine absolutely delicious.
But would you chill the Cabernet Sauvignon to go with the oysters?
Well, when you chill Cabernet Sauvignon, it suppresses aromatics, it suppresses your perception. So it's actually going to make the wine more structured, meaning more bitterness and astringency.
Yeah.
Does that sound good to you, or would you like me to not chill it?
No, I wouldn't chill it.
So these are the discussions we could be having.
That's the sort of thing I love talking about anyway. Thank you very much. I'll let somebody
You're
else
very
start.
welcome. I mean, it's totally new discussions. You go to the table and you see somebody, and I do this with tasting rooms. I teach tasting rooms in restaurants. When they see somebody that's standing back in a group tasting the wine and they're sipping, so it's not that they don't drink, but they don't feel part of the group. How to identify a sweet wine drinker? Say, excuse me, would you like a different wine? And there's the people all I get the pomegranate and the and say, can I find you another wine? Well, I don't really like wine. Do you like sweet wines? And you've got to draw this out of people because we've so embarrassed them. And look at the catastrophe in Sauternes and Barsac of what we've done. And in Vouvray for demi-sec. Anybody remember medium Grave? The vast majority of white Grave wasn't dry. It was sweet. The number one selling, Charles might remember this. When I met with the Grants of St. James's for the very first time, I was patently told the English don't like sweet wines. I said, oh, well, that's interesting. I said, what are the top 10 selling wines in the UK? Well, they're Black Tower, they're Piat d'Or, they're this. Wait a minute. That's a market, you guys. It's a market.
I know.
And if you went and we're at a castle in Germany and you were important and they were serving roast wild boar, they wouldn't say, oh, we've got to find a Zinfandel with the brambly boar-like imagery and whatever. They say, oh, you're important. You're getting our sweetest wine. Because that's how it was done. Very few people in history know that the way French drank champagne up to the turn of the 20th century was 140 grams per liter, you guys. Don't you know that? Why is that not in the books? The French love sweet wines, and 140 grams per liter is 30% sweeter than Coca-Cola. So stop this garbage. Oh, Americans like sweet wines because this, and this. French wine consumption's a catastrophe now. We've really got to become smarter and more rigorous about what we're doing and what we're learning, especially as I'm dying, you know, and I'm 73 now, and I ain't got long. What am I leaving for my kids, you know, for that generation? Why aren't they interested? Because they couldn't give a rat's ass about my values and so forth. If I turn to them and talk about Dungeons and Dragons and wine and history and not only this bucolic misrepresentation that we have of it, but it was also used in bacchanalian events and for debauchery and whatever, they're like, oh, cool.
Tim, thank you very, very much. I think
Okay.
you have certainly
Thank you very
provided
much.
food for thought
Yeah.
for all guests today, and I'm sure everybody will go away and look at their meal and look at their wine and think, oh, am I doing
Maybe
the
I'll
right
change.
thing, or am I doing the wrong thing, or should I think something completely different? So
Thank you all
thank you
so
very
much, and
indeed.
thanks for participating. Sorry for my wacky
No, absolutely
nature.
not. Absolutely not. And just
Email
let
me,
everybody
call me, keep in touch, and thank you.